In 2012, a 13-year-old boy sat alone in his small bedroom in North Carolina. He wasn't texting friends, he didn't have any. He wasn't playing games with teammates, he'd just quit his baseball team. Instead, he stared into the lens of a cheap camera, speaking to it in a voice barely above a whisper. That boy's name was Jimmy Donaldson. One day, the whole world would know him as MrBeast, YouTube's undisputed king. With hundreds of millions of subscribers, billion-dollar businesses, and videos that break the internet on a monthly basis. But back then, he was just a painfully shy kid, trying to fill the silence. What followed was one of the most unlikely rises in entertainment history, fueled not by luck, but by an obsession so intense it bordered on unhealthy. Jimmy would teach himself the hidden rules of YouTube's algorithm, risk every dollar he made on outlandish stunts, and build an empire around the simple act of giving. And along the way, he'd face betrayal, public outrage, and a scandal so big that millions thought his career was over. They were wrong. This is the untold story of how a middle-class boy who could barely say 2 words in public became the most watched and most talked about creator on Earth. Chapter 1. The Silent Kid. Jimmy Donaldson was born on May 7, 1998, in the United States, to parents serving on active duty in the US military. His family looked normal from the outside, middle class, hard-working, but inside the home, things weren't as stable. His parents' marriage was turbulent, marked by conflict until it finally collapsed in 2007. Jimmy was 9 years old. His mother, now raising him and his younger brother alone, worked long hours to keep the family afloat. Jimmy was different from other kids his age. He was an introvert in the extreme sense, so shy that in social situations he'd lower the brim of his baseball cap to avoid eye contact. And baseball was the one place he tried to fit in. He wasn't the loudest or the fastest, but the game gave him a routine until life pulled it away. With his mother often away on duty and few connections at school, Jimmy had to find ways to occupy his time alone. That's when he discovered a strange little website, YouTube, where ordinary people, not TV networks, could share videos with the entire world. At first, Jimmy was just a viewer. He became hooked on Minecraft and Call of Duty videos, watching the same creators for hours. One of them, a gamer named Woody's Gamertag, even quit his job to become a full-time YouTuber. That single decision planted a seed in Jimmy's mind. This wasn't just a hobby, it could be a career. And that's when the obsession began. He talked about YouTube non-stop with his one close friend, Chris Tyson. Whenever they met, the conversation never strayed far from uploads, views, and subscriber counts. Jimmy's mind worked in loops. Once something caught his interest, it didn't let go. It was this obsessive streak that would later become his greatest asset and at times his biggest burden. Because in the years ahead, YouTube would stop being just a fascination. It would become his lifeline. But first, Jimmy had to take the scariest step for a kid who could barely speak in public. He had to turn the camera around and hit record. Chapter 2. YouTube or Nothing. When Jimmy finally created his YouTube channel, it didn't carry a flashy name or a master plan. In fact, the name wasn't even his idea. When he signed up for Xbox Live, the system randomly generated MrBeast 6000. He kept it, mostly because he didn't care about branding yet. At first, his videos were simple gaming uploads with no face reveal. Then came commentary videos, gameplay in the background, Jimmy's voice sharing opinions on random topics. He discovered something surprising. While speaking to people in real life still terrified him, speaking to a camera felt natural. It was as if the lens gave him permission to be himself. But in 2013, at just 15 years old, life threw him a curveball far worse than social anxiety. Jimmy began losing weight, fast, and suffered relentless abdominal pain. Doctors diagnosed him with Crohn's disease, a chronic condition that left him exhausted and weak. It was the end of his baseball days, and with it went the last piece of his normal teenage life. For most people, this would have been a full stop. For Jimmy, it was the opposite. Without baseball, YouTube wasn't just a pastime. It was the only thing he had left that made him feel in control. The problem was, his setup was terrible. A low-resolution Windows phone. A beat-up laptop borrowed from his brother he filmed in secret, his mother assuming he was just chatting with friends. Jimmy started saving, literally $1 at a time, for better equipment. A used laptop, a second-hand microphone, a basic light. And after months of persistence, he finally convinced his parents to get him a refurbished iPhone. It wasn't perfect, but to Jimmy, it was the key to making better videos. He and Chris began experimenting with IRL skits, short, silly scenarios designed purely to entertain. The views were modest, the audience was tiny, and 7 years into uploading, Jimmy still hadn't found success. Most people would have quit. Jimmy didn't even consider it. His mindset was simple: either become the biggest YouTuber in the world or die trying. But his family didn't share his faith in the dream. When Jimmy turned 17, his mother gave him an ultimatum: go to college if you want to stay here, or leave. And that decision would push Jimmy into the most audacious gamble of his young life. Chapter 3: The Great Escape. Jimmy had never liked school. The thought of 4 more years in a college classroom felt like a prison sentence. But his mother's rule was clear. If he wanted a roof over his head, he had to enroll. So he did. On paper. While other freshmen were navigating campus life, Jimmy was slipping out of classes, heading across town, and setting up in borrowed spaces to film videos. It wasn't rebellion for the sake of rebellion. Jimmy knew exactly what he was doing. Every skipped lecture was another hour invested into the only thing he believed could change his life. By 2015, his ideas were getting stranger and more memorable. One video involved trying to cut a table in half using only plastic knives. It was absurd, it was difficult, and it was unlike anything else on YouTube. These impossible challenges were exhausting to make, but they got people's attention. And then something happened that changed the equation. Jimmy's channel started making enough money, barely, to support him. It wasn't glamorous, he wasn't buying cars or gadgets, but for the first time, he could pay rent without asking his mother for help. That was enough. Jimmy left home and moved into his own place. Now, there were no ultimatums, no lectures, no one telling him to focus on something more realistic. This was his life. But while he had escaped the college trap, he still hadn't cracked the YouTube code. His audience was small, growth was slow, and in the back of his mind, he knew he was one big idea away from either breaking through or disappearing into the endless noise of the internet. And then late one night, while watching anime with Chris, an idea hit him. An idea so simple, so absurd, and so time-consuming that it just might change everything. Chapter 4: 40 Hours That Changed Everything. Jimmy and Chris were sprawled out, binge-watching Naruto, hundreds of episodes deep, when Jimmy's mind started drifting. 700 episodes, hours upon hours of commitment. It reminded him of something else YouTube rarely saw anymore: pure, obsessive endurance. What if, Jimmy thought, I just counted out loud to 100,000? It sounded ridiculous. There was no punchline, no flashy production. Just a man sitting and counting. But that was the point. Something so over-the-top tedious that viewers had to click, if only to see if he'd actually do it. So he turned on the camera, and he started. It took 40 straight hours. His voice grew hoarse, his mind dulled, and at times the numbers blurred together. But Jimmy didn't quit. And when he finally reached 100,000, it was more than just the end of a count. It was the start of something big. When he uploaded the video, the reaction was instant. 5 million views in 5 days. After 400 uploads with modest numbers, Jimmy had his first viral hit. And with it came the revelation that would guide his career. If you want to succeed on YouTube, you have to do something so unusual, so unbelievable, that people can't help but watch. He doubled down, counting to 200,000, microwaving a microwave, building a castle out of plastic cups. But then came the idea that would set his brand in motion. A small company, Quid, offered him $5,000 for a sponsorship. Jimmy countered $10,000, promising the video would go viral. They agreed. Instead of keeping the money, Jimmy walked out into the city and handed it to homeless people. Chris filmed the reactions: surprise, disbelief, tears. When the video went live, it exploded. The warm glow effect was real. Viewers didn't just enjoy watching, they felt good watching. It was the perfect cycle. Use money from one video to fund the next giveaway. Bigger giveaway, more views. More views, bigger brand deals. Bigger brand deals, even bigger giveaways. He gave $10,000 to random Twitch streamers, $10,000 to a pizza delivery guy, $100,000 to his own mother, paying off her mortgage in a single moment. It was a model no one else could match, and Jimmy knew it. The only question now was, how far could he push it? The answer would take him far beyond random acts of kindness and into a new era of engineered virality. And to get there, he'd have to dissect YouTube itself, down to the minute. Chapter 5. The Algorithm Hacker. By 2018, Jimmy wasn't just making videos, he was running experiments. Every stunt, every challenge, every thumbnail was a deliberate test. He had moved far beyond guessing what might work. Now, he was building a system. The stunts themselves grew bigger with each upload. One week, he built a life-size mansion entirely out of cardboard boxes. The next, he signed up as a rideshare driver and shocked passengers by pulling up in a tank. He stayed underwater for 24 hours straight. And then came the last to let go challenges, where the final person still touching a Lamborghini or a private jet would win it outright. The prizes were massive, the stakes ridiculous, and audiences couldn't look away. Part of the magic came from the people around him: Chandler, Carl, Nolan. Friends who had become on-screen fixtures gave viewers familiar personalities to root for and laugh with. In every video, someone would walk away with life-changing money or prizes, and someone else would lose it all in the final moments. But Jimmy knew that stunts and personalities were only half the battle. The real war on YouTube wasn't just about getting people to click, it was about keeping them watching until the very end. To win that battle, he obsessed over thumbnails and audience retention. His thumbnails became deceptively simple, designed to stop a viewer mid-scroll. He used scale to shock the eye, standing in front of a Lego tower so impossibly tall it defied belief. He played with color theory, repainting reality itself, turning plain white walls into deep black so that his bright orange shirt burst off the screen. Behind the scenes, he created an internal playbook for structuring each video like a perfectly timed roller coaster. The first 10 seconds always delivered exactly what the title and thumbnail promised. Within a minute, viewers felt rewarded for clicking. Then the pacing accelerated, throwing them into a whirlwind of action, before suddenly dropping an unexpected twist to jolt them back if their attention wandered. Between those peaks, he built emotional connections, human moments that kept people invested in the outcome. And when the payoff finally came, he ended abruptly, leaving no dead air for viewers to drift away. The strategy was surgical, and the results were undeniable. By 2019, Jimmy had crossed 20 million subscribers. The growth was relentless, yet he knew YouTube was like a treadmill. Stop running and you'd slide backward. Jimmy had no intention of slowing down. The next step would be even more ambitious. He was going to take the MrBeast brand beyond YouTube itself, building businesses that could stand on their own. It would cement his position as the most dominant creator in the world. But it would also set the stage for the most dangerous moment of his career. Chapter 6: Building the Beast Empire. By the time most YouTubers would have been content to coast on their success, Jimmy was already looking beyond the platform. He understood something most creators didn't. YouTube fame was powerful, but it was fragile. A single algorithm change, a single controversy could strip it away. If he wanted to stay on top, he needed to build an empire that could survive without the whims of a recommendation feed. That's when MrBeast started turning into a brand that lived off-platform. In 2022, he launched Feastables, a better-for-you chocolate company that sold out its first batch almost instantly. He created View Stats, a YouTube analytics tool aimed at helping other creators grow their channels. Every move was calculated, each new venture backed by the same obsessive attention to detail that fueled his videos. Meanwhile, his main channel was still growing at a pace the industry had never seen. In just a few years, he blasted past the 300 million subscriber mark, becoming the most followed individual creator in history. And the scale of his content reflected it. Videos were no longer just stunts or challenges. They were full-blown productions, costing millions of dollars to make. To the outside world, it looked like Jimmy had reached the summit. He had the audience, the businesses, and the cultural influence to match. But behind the scenes, the higher he climbed, the more precarious his position became. With every step into the mainstream, the stakes were growing. Because the more visible you are, the more people are waiting to see you fall. And soon, one of the biggest falls in YouTube history would be aimed squarely at him. Chapter 7: The Attempted Takedown. In mid-2024, the unthinkable happened. A former employee named Dawson French appeared seemingly out of nowhere and dropped 2 videos that sent shockwaves through the entire YouTube community. The first video accused Jimmy of faking parts of his most ambitious projects, claiming that some of the stunts viewers saw were enhanced with computer-generated graphics. The second went even further, targeting Beast Philanthropy, his charity channel. Dawson alleged that many of the donations were staged, that prize money in challenge videos was never actually delivered to the winners, and that Jimmy's generosity was nothing more than a performance for clicks. Within hours, the videos had racked up millions of views. Within days, they had topped 10 million. The reaction was swift and brutal. Longtime fans flooded comment sections with disbelief, confusion, and anger. Boycott MrBeast began trending on X. Some of his most lucrative brand partners quietly backed out of deals worth millions. The backlash wasn't just online chatter, it was the kind of reputational blow that could sink a career. Jimmy's team went silent. He didn't post reaction videos, didn't flood his feed with denials, didn't rage at the camera. For a man whose life revolved around uploading, the sudden quiet was deafening. In that vacuum, speculation grew. Was the king of YouTube about to fall? But Jimmy wasn't idle, he was preparing. A few weeks later, a smaller creator named Soggy Cereal uploaded a detailed breakdown that dismantled many of Dawson's claims. The infamous CGI shredder shown in one of Jimmy's videos. It was real, filmed on location. The supposed fake donations, no evidence beyond Dawson's word. Piece by piece, the foundation of the accusations began to crumble. Then Jimmy stepped back into the public eye, not with a 10-minute video, but with a 2-hour unfiltered podcast interview. He addressed every allegation, calmly and directly. On the subject of Beast philanthropy, he explained that the channel was a registered non-profit, with audited accounts posted publicly for anyone in the world to verify. Every donation was real, every payout documented. By the time the interview ended, something unexpected had happened. The momentum had shifted. Instead of bleeding subscribers, Jimmy's numbers stabilized. The comments began filling with messages of support. And Dawson, he vanished from the internet entirely. What could have been the biggest crisis of Jimmy's career had become a strange kind of victory. The accusations had forced him to be more transparent than ever, and in doing so, he'd rebuilt trust with the very audience that made him. But it was a reminder too, a warning. At this level, the higher you rise, the more people will try to pull you down. Jimmy had weathered the storm, but even as he came out stronger, he knew this wouldn't be the last time someone would aim for the throne. Still, when the dust settled, one fact remained unchanged. MrBeast was still on top, and with his net worth now surpassing $1 billion, his influence had never been greater. But Jimmy's ambitions were already moving beyond YouTube videos and online controversies. He was preparing to take the Beast brand into territory no creator had ever attempted before. From the outside, Jimmy Donaldson's life today looks almost unrecognizable compared to the shy boy whispering into a camera in his bedroom. He's built a channel that commands hundreds of millions of viewers, launched companies worth 9 figures, and turned giving away money into an art form that's as strategic as it is generous. He's also survived what could have been a career-ending scandal, emerging with his audience, his reputation, and his empire intact. That alone puts him in rare company. Most creators who face that kind of public fire never recover. Jimmy not only recovered, he came out stronger. But for all the scale and spectacle, the most remarkable part of his story might be its origin. It didn't start with a team of producers or millions in funding. It started with a teenager who could barely talk to people, who found safety in speaking to a camera instead. It started with an obsession, one that never let go. That obsession built a career out of endurance stunts, fueled a business through relentless experimentation, and guided every decision from a $1 microphone to multi-million-dollar giveaways. It's the same trait that pushed him to rebuild after his biggest controversy, and the same one that will likely carry him into whatever comes next.